Hey guys, it's Lisa and welcome to my channel. I'm kind of excited about today's video because I'm going to be making over some bells, and I saw these on Pinterest and wanted to kind of do my take on them. And what I love about these is they're very readily available and not expensive at all, because these are something that you can get at the Dollar Tree. So I went and picked up two different styles of these, and this top is very flimsy, but I don't mind at all because I'm not going to use that on any of these. But I'm going to go ahead, I did the little flat one and the one with the ridges. There was one more style that I just wasn't crazy about, so I didn't get any of those. What I got most of was this one with the ridges because I thought it adds a lot of character. I got a couple of the regular bells simply because they're kind of a traditional look, and I wanted to do something with a traditional look as well. Now, these come in gold and silver too, I think. Somehow ended up with all red, and which was probably a mistake, and I'll show you why a little later on. But I'm just going to take everything off the top. Now, these with the plain that are plain just have this little bit of faux greenery on top, and it removes pretty easily also. Now, what these little bells don't have is the little things inside, and someone will tell me, I'm sure, what the name of those are. I can't even think of what the name of them are. But obviously, you're not going to get the sound with these because these are plastic. It's all about the look. But I still wanted to add those on the inside just to make them look a little bit better if you look at the underneath. So I will be adding those too. Now, this is the one that I saw on Pinterest, and I absolutely love it. But obviously, I want to do mine a little bit different. I don't want to copy this person. But because this one is red, I'm going to go ahead and do one in red. And you know me in color, I usually don't do a lot of color, but I just thought that red one looked so pretty. So I'm just going to go over this with one coat of red. And I'm thinking that this is Honky Tonk Red, which is a Dixie Belle color. But any red will do, because even though I want this to have a country red look, I'm just going to achieve that by adding brown wax. Now, what I did that I haven't shown on camera is clean these with some alcohol because you don't want anything keeping your paint from sticking. Now, obviously, I'm not worried about bleeding, the color bleeding through on this one since it is red, but I did have that issue with another color that I'm going to be doing and end up having to clear coat it and then start over. So if you're adding a color to this that is lighter than the red, or a color that the red could bleed through and overpower, then obviously you're going to need to clear coat this first. So I gave this one inside and out 2 coats of the red. Now, I could have gotten away with one, but I didn't want this metallic showing through it all. So again, I gave it 1 coat, let it dry well, and then finished it off with a second coat. And I'm going to go through and paint all of these first so that they can be drying before I make over each one. Now, what I really loved about the bell is the spindles added to the top. And so I just went in my stash and found all my little spindles that were already cut. And then I just kind of sanded them down. And then I'm just going to look at each one of these and see what each one I think calls for. But I found the one that I wanted to use on this one. And as they did in the inspiration photo, I want the top of this to be red also. Now, not all of them are going to be the same color as the bell, but for this particular one, I just really like the look of the red together on it. So I'm going to give this one also 2 coats after I clean it of the color of red. And again, the color red doesn't really matter so much. As it turns out, because of this being a darker spindle, I did get a darker red with this one, even on the second coat. Now, I purchased 6 of these, but it's something that you can mass produce pretty quickly. So if you have an outlet to sell these, then you might just buy several and just go through one day and paint them all, and then let them dry so that the next day you can add all the other elements to it. Again, the first one I painted red, and then the second one I decided I wanted to make white, and this was the mistake. So I painted inside and out in one coat of white, and I noticed pretty quickly, especially, that the inside really started to bleed. And so I went ahead and finished one coat on it so that all the surface would be even. And then after I got a good coat on it, then I let it dry really well, and then I took it outside and sprayed it with a clear sealer. Now, I wanted the white ones to be a set, so I made this mistake with 2 of them actually. Again, I just painted them all white and then let it dry really well, and then went over it with a clear sealer. For the next one though, I wanted to do it in green. So I put 2 coats of the color English Ivy, both on the inside and out. Again, on this one I didn't have to worry about base coating it or clear coating it first, because I didn't have any bleed through issues with this one. So 2 coats on the inside and out of this one. And for the last 2 in the traditional shape, I decided I wanted to give them more of a bronze look, and because I didn't want to take away from the traditional look of the bell. So what I did was I started with 1 coat of the color Coffee Bean, and that's just a really dark brown, because I wanted to have a base color underneath my gilding wax. That's what I'm going to be doing with these. Now, I could have used a bronze patina paint from Dixie Belle, but I decided that it was easier if I just go ahead and do 1 coat on this. I didn't want to add the patina, so again, I just gave this 1 coat of the color Coffee Bean and let it dry well. I did this one and the other one in this color, and then let them dry well before I added the gilding wax. Now, in order to add the spindle piece to the top, I had to take my wire cutters and just cut this little lip from around. It's just plastic, so it cut pretty easily. And what wasn't flush afterwards, I just took my little finger sander and sanded it smooth. And any area that I sanded too much off of that showed around the spindle, I can just touch that up later. But as you can see, it just fits perfectly on there. And I'm just going to hot glue that on. This wood to plastic, for some reason, the hot glue really does hold well. So I'm just going to use Mom's term here and say that I put a right smart of glue on there. I wanted to make sure that I had plenty so that every area would come in contact with the plastic. And I even took my glue afterwards and kind of filled in the crack around the outside just to make sure that it all had good contact. And again, I will just touch that up with paint later. And then I went over the whole thing and I just used a cloth for this, with some clear wax. And I'm just doing this because I'm going to be adding brown wax, and I want to be able to remove the excess better. So starting with the clear wax works a lot better. It doesn't grab the brown in a spotty fashion the way that it would if you didn't use the clear first. And then if you use too much of the brown wax, then you can go back with the clear wax and work and rub it off, kind of like an eraser. Now here is how badly this bled after I sprayed it with a clear coat. So I know that I told you to spray it with a clear coat, and I still think that it needs to be. Once this dried well, I was able to get it to cover, but for some reason when I sprayed that on, it really pulled the red before it dried. And for that reason, if I were you guys, when I pick these up, the ones that I plan on painting other than red or a dark color, I would get either the gold or the silver, because this red really wanted to bleed through. Again, once this dried, I was able to cover it. Now it did take a couple of coats still, so that I did a lot of work on these that I wouldn't have had to do if I had just started with a lighter color to begin with. Now some of you may have already noticed with the red bell that I'm working on that I glued the spindle on before I should have, because I want to add those little things on the inside, and it's impossible to do after you add these. And I will say that even before you add these, it was difficult to figure out how to do it. I first drilled a hole in part of my spindle that was going to go down inside so that I could tie those on, but then you couldn't get them through the hole. So I ended up just really having to maneuver, and I'll show you what I did to make that work. But definitely you don't want to glue that in until you add those. But of course I did, even with these. And what I'm using for the inside of these is these little crystal looking beads. And here is where I found the issue. I had drilled that hole in the top, and I was planning on feeding the string through. Now I'm just using a little jute string here. And I was planning on feeding it through, tying one of those beads to one side and then to the other. But then I started to figure out, how am I going to get it down in there? Because obviously the bead wouldn't fit. And some of you may come up with a much better way than I did. But what I did was I just tied the bead to each side of the string, and I left my string probably about 1 foot long because you can cut it off the way that I'm doing it. So I folded the string in half after it had the beads on the end, and then I pulled it up through the hole and glued it in place, and then glued my spindle on top of that. And where I had to adjust the length, any amount that was sticking out, I just kind of clipped that off. And then I just finished that off by adding a little bead of hot glue all the way around. And yes, I am using a low temp glue gun, so it isn't burning my fingers. Now I'm using large pearl beads on the white ones, and I just do the same thing. I just tied one to the end of each of these pieces of string, folded that in half, and then pulled it up through. So I tied a knot in the end, but I also added a little dot of glue just to make sure that, because I'm using a thinner string here, and I wanted to make sure that it didn't come through those holes. And then as you can see, I've got some excess here, but I'm just going to kind of feed that up through, fold it in half there, and then I'm going to feed that up through and glue it to the side before I add my spindle. Again, I'm sure some of you can come up with a better way to make this work, but this is just what I ended up with, and it did work. I still feel like there must be a better way. Again, I did both white ones the same way so that I could sell them as a set. And then this next one is the one that I'm going to do in brass. Again, I'm going to do a couple of them in bronze. So it already has the dark brown on it. Any color of dark brown will work. But I'm just clipping this off, and I'm going to use this longer spindle on this one. I just want to give these a different look, and although I'm doing 2 of these in the bronze, they're each going to be different. So I'm just going to glue this on in the same way I'm going to add the beads, but I'm using wooden beads on this one because what I want to do is paint them with gilding wax also. But what I will say is that I added my beads to the inside of these before I painted them, which wasn't very bright. So when you guys do it, you'll want to paint your beads before you add them because it's pretty difficult to do it afterwards. I did make it work, but it isn't the easiest. So I do want to do similar looks on both of the ones with the bronze finish, but I'm doing different spindles on each of them, and on this one I'm doing a much chunkier spindle. And here is where I was really struggling to get those little beads on the inside painted. But again, I did make it work. It was just not the easiest. And what I did with both of these bells is just dry brush the bronze gilding wax over the top of them, leaving some of that brown showing through, and that just kind of gave it some dimension in the color and gave it more of an antique bronze look. And once I got a light coat of this all over it, I also did the inside as far as you could see up inside it. But after I got the bronze gilding wax on it, then I just very, very lightly went over it with some gold gilding wax. And that just added another dimension in the color, and that just gives it more of a realistic look. So here I am adding the gold, and I used a much lighter amount of the gold than I did the bronze. Again, I could have used the patina paint from Dixie Belle on these if I had wanted to add some sort of patina to it, and I did think about it, but in the end I just wanted it to be bronze. So now I'm back to the green one, and here's where I'm adding the brown wax to dull this green down, and the brown wax really worked well. And I found this little ornament at Walmart, and this was $1.98, and it just kind of gave me the idea. It kind of makes me think of a spindle, and it gave me the idea because I love the color of this and I love the design on it to use this as the handle on the green one. So when I toned the green down, it ended up being the exact color of this spindle or of this ornament. So I think this one is going to make a really neat little bell. And on the inside of this one, instead of using the beads, I decided to use some rusty bells. And I know that's a bell or bells inside a bell, but I just thought it would add a neat little look. So I just tied those to the end of this string. And again, I just folded it in half and fed it up through the bottom and glued it in place before I added my ornament. And this little ornament is actually what inspired me to do one in the color green. I want to thank all of you guys who have checked on the progress of my knee after I broke it. I have wonderful news on that. I went to the doctor on Thursday, and they gave me the okay to start trying to walk on it. So it's a little painful, but no more than I thought it would be, and I'm up and walking and so happy about that. Now I think this little ornament looks like it was made for this little bell. Now I thought seriously about painting the little spindle on these white ones white. But I decided that I liked the contrast, and so I just decided to take some brown wax and just even this out. And obviously I did that on both of these. And I decided I wanted to keep the top of this one the wood color also, so I just added some brown wax to this one, and this will be the final finish on this spindle. And now it's time to start putting the finishing touches on these. And as you can see on this red, I've already added my brown wax here, and it really brought the colors together, I think. And now I'm just going to start gluing some greenery around the top of this. Again, here is my inspiration one, and they did a shabby bow on this one, and I absolutely love how this one turned out. But again, I wanted to do mine different, so I'm just going to add some greenery and berries and pine cones to mine. And I added some of the same elements to the green one. And then because of the white on the ornament, I decided that this needed some white touches, and so I just dabbed some white paint over all the embellishments to resemble snow, and that just brought that white down, and brighten this up, and I just really love the end result. Now on the white ones, I wanted to keep those a little bit more country or farmhouse, and so I took some jute twine and a strip of black and white gingham fabric and tied around the top. So I just tied that in a simple bow and added some greenery and pine cones to this one. And I did the same thing on the other one. Now I want these two bronze ones to have more of an antique look, so I just got a couple strips here of fabric, actually just one on this one, and just tied some vintage lace around the top, and then added a little embellishment over the top of that. Now this one I wanted to paint in the color sea glass. And sea glass is such a beautiful color of kind of a bluish green, and it has such a vintage look, especially if you tone it down with some brown glaze. So I put 2 coats of the color sea glass on the handle of this, and then let that dry well, and then I brushed some brown glaze over the top of it and rubbed that off. And when I rubbed that off, I also rubbed some of the paint off, and so that gave me a really pretty natural distress. And the brown glaze just pairs so well with sea glass. It just makes it such a beautiful vintage color. I also wanted to make sure and keep a really vintage look on this one, so I took a piece of lace that had this color in it, and also just some vintage ivory colored lace, and tied both of those around the neck of this one. And then I tied a little vintage key on and some other little embellishments. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening, and God bless you and your family.